Tonight I've been having a look at the oil piping setup in this engine, and it's a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. This engine was previously modified to take an external filter, which is what this is, that basically goes on there like that. How this seems to work, it's all cobbled together from bits of fitting and things like that, so it's not the best, to be honest. What would normally happen is, this is a spare oil setup I've got. This end here is opposite the oil pump. That's, we can see it, this bit in here. So here's the oil pump. This in here is the oil pressure relief valve that's on there. So normally the oil feed just goes straight in there like that with these two straight pipes. This is the pickup into the sump, which I need to check on mine just to see what the depth is, because I've got a Brooklands sump. I believe these two feeds go off to the rocker gear, and these two go off to the two main bearings here and down here. So you can see this one has been modified to split the output pipe, and one of them comes across here through this rather odd collection of fittings and via this pipe in a rather ugly way over the top of the engine mount, and then to this, which is a modern spin-on oil filter. I say modern, this was obviously done years ago, because this is the filter and it doesn't have a date on it, but it was made by a company called GUD, a New Zealand company apparently. I've never heard of them, so I don't know how old that is, but could have been a new old stock filter, I suppose. You can see with this arrangement, everything only just clears. I can turn this. This one isn't done up because these pipes are all bent, so it's not fitting. But you can see down here, it only just clears the crank. I mean, that should be fine, but I'll definitely need to make sure there's plenty of clearance there. So I think this will work. I don't like this ugly loop of pipe going over the engine mount. I think it would be better to at least route that sort of along here somewhere. It'll be a bit more out of the way then as well. But I think this setup is probably okay if I can work out all the fittings and things and make sure nothing's going to come undone. But I really want to replace all of this pipe with steel pipe. That's what they seem to use originally. This is an original one that hasn't been taken apart. This is steel pipe, which is why it's all corroded. I did take one of these that I had apart. It was all mangled and the pipes were all broken. That one had an air bell on it. So you can see this one doesn't. But normally, I think later on they added the air bell, which kind of goes in here somewhere. So that would normally be on this pipe sitting down inside there, and the reason for that is to even out fluctuations on the oil line going to the oil pressure gauge. So I don't actually need that because I've got the oil filter. The oil filter will do that job for me. I'm not actually now sure where the rest of the pipes go. For example, where the oil filter, the oil pressure gauge takeoff is, and the rocker gear. Because I'm using the earlier setup, there's an external oil feed that goes to the rocker gear. That's what this is. It goes into the ends of the rocker shafts, and I'm not sure I've got the right fittings for those. I've got a sort of random collection of bits and pieces. So that's something else I need to look at. This is obviously homemade, but I've got various little bits of fitting and things. So these are the copper pipes that would have gone to those cam feeds. As I say, I'm not exactly sure where the oil gauge pickup would have come from. I've also just noticed there's actually another hole in this block there, and I have no idea what that hole is for. Mice maybe? I don't know. It's not threaded. Let's have a look. So this is the spare block. Oh, it does have a hole there as well. I can't tell if that's threaded or if it's just dirty. I'm not entirely certain what that hole would be for then, which is interesting. So that's something to look at. About this block. This is my sort of dummy setup block. This is, you also have to have an oil feed to here. So I'm going to need to figure out where all the pipes go. So I think one pipe might go to this fitting, which sends oil to the intermediate gear and the crank gear. And you can see up here how the rocker boxes are threaded, which is where the fittings go, where the oil pipes go. And the oil pipe is sort of a Y pipe that comes down. So we have a look on this one. Ah, this has a hole as well. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, I have no idea what that hole's for. What else have we been doing? So, like I say, I'm going to look at redoing all of this piping. I don't know if I trust this copper piping. I think I should probably redo it in steel, and I need to make sure all these fittings and things are correct and are going to work and aren't going to fail in any way. I also did find my oil pump bolts. I've been having a little bit of a tidy up and sorting out what parts I've got, various bits and pieces, and putting them in boxes and things all ready to go. These are the rocker covers I'm actually going to use, and you can see the threaded ends there, and I've got the right rocker shafts with the right holes, and this is all because of the head that I've got. The later engines actually had an internal oil feed into the head, which I don't have in this case. So that's sort of the oil pump mystery. So I'll have to figure that out. But I do have quite a few spare parts. So, you know, there's a oil pump mount, and these are the pressure release valves. I wonder if this one is off a later engine because it's only got the single takeoff on it, same as that one, whereas this one has two. So maybe that's what the difference is. I'll probably get a new spring and a new ball for there. One of them didn't seem to have a ball. It actually had this little brass flat thing. I'm not actually sure which one had that in it now, because I've taken all of these apart. And I'm obviously missing some bits with some of these, so again, it's going to be a matter of trying to figure out what I've got and how it all fits together and make it work. The other thing I did today, this is a very dilute phosphoric acid solution, and in there, you might just be able to see them, I have the plasma cut rear shock mounts. That's a length of 60mm diameter steel bar, mild steel bar, to make the little tapered spacers that I'm going to need. And I'll machine the pins from 4140, or is it 4041 high tensile steel. The pins will just need to be sort of similar to these, but they'll go, what I'll do is I'll do it the same as the rear suspension. They'll go all the way through the chassis with a spacer block either side, and basically be done up with a big nut there, um, to make the chassis mount for the shock absorbers. So that's coming along. When I do finally get to the top end of the engine, I have to go through and sort out my rocker gear, and I'm going to build up the faces on these with some TIG hard facing rod I've got. I want to try that and then grind those back. I think that's everything on the Riley at the moment. The one piece of probably bad news with my remote gear shifter. We've been chasing that up. Paul, who made it for me and is sending it, has been chasing up at their end. And apparently they said, yes, it's been sent, it's been exported, it's in New Zealand. And New Zealand Post at this end are saying, nope, it never arrived in New Zealand, we don't have it scanned. It never showed up. So the tracking basically seems to indicate it was ready to export or exported from the UK. They don't really have enough states, so you really know where it is. The lady at New Zealand Post said, regardless of how long it takes to get through their systems and customs and things like that, as soon as it arrived in the country, it would have been scanned, so they would know it was here, and that hasn't happened. She did say if the barcodes and things had come off it, as long as the addresses and things were on it, they would make attempts to contact whoever it's meant to be for, or else it would get sent back. And none of that seems to have happened. We were waiting for Parcel Force on the UK end. They said they would check with the New Zealand Post people. That was at the end of last week. Interestingly, when I phoned yesterday, that doesn't seem to have happened yet, because the New Zealand Post lady was able to tell me that they would also see, as well as the tracking number, they would be able to see if there were any inquiries on that tracking number, and there hadn't been so far. So hopefully that means they're still getting around to it. The advice here was start doing the lost package process, because it's probably gone. She said even at its worst, things weren't taking quite that long to get through. So I guess we just have to start doing that, which is a bit disappointing. And I'm still getting advice on how we actually get these cars on the road. I'm reading all the rules. They're so open to interpretation, it's very hard to follow. And I'm still trying to find the right person who can help with that, which is what they even say in their own documentation. They talk about, oh yes, you have to find the right certifier to help you through the process, someone who understands the cars and things. But finding someone who understands vintage cars is a little bit trickier. But that's basically where we're at tonight. But at least everything's closing now, because obviously it's Christmas at the end of the week. I may try and order some oil pipe tube, but I think that's going to end up being a after the Christmas break type thing. But at least I have got the parts to mount the rear shock absorbers. If I'm very lucky, the other brake parts I'm waiting for might arrive before the end of the week, which would be good, because then I can start looking at those as well. I've also been playing around with this 3D printed model of the Riley, but I haven't had much luck so far. So this was a version of the chassis I printed out using Support, which is where the bits of the model that aren't touching a flat surface need to have plastic printed underneath them to hold them up basically while it's being printed. And then you break that plastic off afterwards. It's called Support. But it always leaves a really messy finish. You can kind of sand it, but I thought a better way might be breaking the model into pieces that can be printed flat, which is what all of these are, and then super gluing them together. But I haven't had much luck gluing them, although this one now seems to be glued. I think the super glue I've got just takes too long to go off, and it takes a while for it to bond. But you can see without the support, these are a lot cleaner. I had an awful lot of trouble printing it, and sometimes this happens with 3D printing. It just goes wrong for some reason. So you can see a lot of these parts just aren't very well printed. Oh, I think I went past the gimbal limits then. And I was having a lot of failures and things. I was really having a great deal of problem with this particular plastic, this PLA. And it turns out it was, I think it's the actual plastic itself. Every so often you'll get a reel of plastic that just won't print nicely. You can see that one on the printer. It's just really rough, the surface finish. And I've gone through and I've cleaned the printer and I've cleared the nozzle and I've made sure the cables and everything are all correct, and it just wasn't printing well at all. Some of them did. So you can see these were some of the first ones I did. And these actually came out reasonably well. But just lately, this roll of filament is just rubbish. So I'm going to try another roll of filament, and I'm going to go back to trying to print the entire thing with the support under it. But I'm going to work on the settings, play with the settings, and see if I can get a nice setting for easily removable support. I think half of the problem I had is just because this particular roll of filament just isn't very good. With some filaments, nylon in particular, you can dry them out. If they get moisture in them, it can cause problems. Nylon you can cook, and you actually have to effectively bake it for a few hours before you use it to get any moisture out of it. But I'm not sure about PLA. May need to try something like that with this as well. But the model I'm using, I did simplify the model, and it may be important that I actually do have those CAD models off the chassis. Going through the rules for the low volume certification, for a scratch built car, that's one of the things they seem to want. They want all sorts of documentation, including blueprints of things like the chassis and the brake setup and all sorts of things, which makes sense for an honestly scratch built car when you're building a car that's not like anything else. But for the Austin 7, for example, I don't see the point in providing chassis diagrams when it's just a bulk standard Austin 7 chassis, of which there must be hundreds of them actually registered and running around on the road still today. So this is one of the reasons I need to talk to the right person who understands the rules, and not just somebody who'll just blindly say, oh yes, you need to provide blueprints off a chassis, because I'm not sure how I do that. Obviously I can draw them up myself, but then all I'm drawing is what I've got. So if the point of the blueprint is so they can make sure the design is correct, I don't know how I'm supposed to do that. So it might be a good thing that I'm actually doing these drawings. Of course, the original purpose of that was so that I could figure out how the body's going to work and build the different stations for the body. But there's no rush to do that, and I want to make sure I can actually get the thing on the road anyway, before I even start doing that. My little camera gimbal ran out of battery. I thought I was finally making some good progress on something today, and I've painted up the rear shock mounts that mount on the axle, and I've done up the pins. They're all Loctited in place, and I'll bake the paint on probably tomorrow when these are all properly dry, tomorrow night. And I thought I was finally making progress, and then I've realized I don't actually have any 1/2-inch BSF bolts to actually bolt them on. So that's something else I'll have to sort out.